Um, let's go into the second question. All right, so this is part two. Now we're talking about moving well. All right, so our tagline is going to move well, live well, do amazing things. We were able to, in that whole move well piece, we are able to identify some of the things for you that really kind of added value to a quality of life, to your quality of life. So photography, we talked about some endurance running, we talked about a lot of things from that standpoint. So let's talk a little bit more about how the performance piece, or really the recovery piece, started to add maybe some value in terms of the living of you living well, living kind of a more of a whole life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of, I guess the obvious one is, if you're moving a lot, I mean, mood wise, physically, all that, I'm feeling better in
Yeah.
general. That's a big thing. Is I'm since I've really started moving a ton. Like, if I get sick, it's really not that bad. If I even get sick, I don't know. I always find the day after, I exercise, I'm always in a much better mood than if I have a lazy day, which
Yeah.
sometimes hard after a recovery day.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But
Definitely. Definitely.
there's that. And then there's also, maybe I'm just crazy. I kind of wonder sometimes when it comes to this kind of stuff, but you kind of, I joke with friends who are like, "Ooh, I hate running. I never want to do that." I'm like, "Well, that was me 6 years ago." And it's definitely an acquired taste, but it's like, it's almost like a fever addiction. Like, once you get it, it's like, "Ooh, I love this." So it, I don't know. I don't know how to explain other than, it just kind of makes you happy.
No,
And it spreads to a lot of things. There's so much research on, like, I have a bookmarks thing on my work computer that I read where it's like exercising is part of your job. And it's this whole list of like how, exercising makes you a more productive worker, exercise, makes your quality of life better and all of this.
right.
In case they ever
Yeah.
tell me I exercise too much.
Well, look, and we talked about that too, because one of the cool things from that I see kind of in your story is that you've tied different elements together. One session, you're like, okay, well, what are we going to do this session, and how's that going to impact what I do 2 days from now? Because I've got to shoot this Saturday, and I've got to be able to shoot, right? So the task is actually getting the photographs taken, but the experience, like we talked about what the movement experience is, the experience overall requires great mobility. It requires you to be able to stabilize yourself. And then it requires you maybe get in weird positions, which is really more of a function of being a photographer, right? So
Mhm.
I definitely dig that. I mean, we started talking about the book Born to Run, right? And we talked about that, started kind of unpacking it. But what was cool about it is that, like, we started the discussion we had in terms of, and you really were built to sprint, right? Like, you were built, you weren't necessarily built as you didn't come in, you didn't present as that your prototypical endurance athlete, right? But you went from kind of loathing running to understanding, well, maybe there's something here. And so you get that endorphin release, and now it's okay. Well, this is a pretty cool thing. I can go do this, but I also like getting on a bike. I also like hiking. I also like doing these different things, and they all add value to my life. So by doing that, kind of like you're talking about the article, if you're sleeping better, if you've got better relationships, if you're able to manage your stress better, because we're all going to have stress. And then even going out and running, let's say you're running 4 or 5 days a week, there's a certain amount of cortisol that's associated with that. So you've got to find a way to kind of be able to flush it from your system, and kind of regulate it a little bit. So I think exercise is part of your job, or looking at exercise is not just a health and wellness thing, but looking at movement as that experience. So the more positive experiences you have, I think, the better the better you're able to show up in life, right? So what's let's talk about we're gonna wrap kind of this segment up talking about one thing, which is how has being able to run, how has kind of having some positive experiences on the PT side and the wellness side, and then kind of getting back to where you want to be on track to achieve your goals. How has that impacted the way Andrew shows up every day?
Hmm, good question. Um, a lot of let me think about that for a second. Um, I think a lot of morale, and it's not, it definitely used to be, especially back in, March and April, which, we haven't really talked about this here yet, but I'm seeing Kenny consistently again because I just absolutely destroyed my body and my hip back at the end of March, which, coincided with some, a lot of boredom in life when everyone was told you have to stay at home for a month and you can't do anything but grocery shop basically. And um, we were told, you're not allowed to leave your house unless you're grocery shopping or exercising outside basically. And so I found, I was relegated. I could barely walk. I was stuck on the couch for a month. And oh man, that took a took a big toll on you mentally. And I think, a lot of stillness kind of drains you. So being able to move and being able to run, like even detaching from like okay, I really love running and I'm crazy like that. And I'm really competitive and I want to do better than I did last time. And, one day my sprinter's body, this will probably never happen, but I want to win races. Um, so even detaching from that, just the idea of being able to move, just it feels like it helps me function better every day. I have more energy. I'm able to pay attention to people better. I'm able to, feel like I'm able to do my job better. There are some days where, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that deals with this, but you sit at a desk for 2 3 hours or 8 hours or however many, and you're like, holy cow, I can't even keep my eyes open. And I can solve that with a 2 or 3 mile run. I'll come back like full of energy, ready to
Yeah,
tackle the day, or even, just getting up and moving. So I think it helps me be present.
yeah,
To
no,
boil that
that's
down into one sentence after
yeah.
giving you a novel.
Nah, that's awesome. That's all. Well, I think the value kind of starting with the pieces and then coming back and just kind of clarifying it there. That's awesome. So now let's talk about this final piece. Okay,
Okay.
so and it's the doing amazing things. A lot of people look at PT or exercise or health and wellness, and they kind of just they sometimes we have a tendency to kind of put it in a box, right?
Hmm.
And not really see how it it's blended into how we live life, how we show up for people and the things that are important to us. So first first session, you were getting you there was this goal, there was this event that was going to happen, and so it's a summit. So tell us a little bit about that summit, um, and what that experience was like.
All right. Well, first of all, and it had nothing to do with my IT band. It's purely the altitude, but it was probably the most miserable I've ever felt in my life physically. That was awful. I've had the flu before in the past, and it doesn't even compare to what altitude will do for you when your body's not ready for it. So, fun mental challenge and physical challenge. Um, but yeah, that it's honestly, I said that and I forgot the question. Was it just kind of specifically to tell you about the summit experience?
Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
right? Yeah.
that's it.
Um, so yeah, other than that, it was, being at the top of a gigantic, I say gigantic, it's not, 20,000 feet, it's 14,000 foot mountain that, you had to hike 20 miles just to get to the base of it. And then, it's not just walk up to the top, it's, hands and feet, snow fields, ice axes, all that fun stuff. It's a really good feeling to be up at the top and realize, okay, I'm not gonna lie and say I felt great at the top. At the top, I sat down and one of my friends was like, "Are you okay?" It's like, "No, I feel awful." It's the hardcore definition of type 2 fun, which I'm a big fan of. Um, but yeah, it's still, even looking back, the memory I have is, oh yeah, it sucked a little bit, but it was kind of fun being able to be up there and say, okay, well, I climbed this really cool mountain. Like, okay, a lot of people go out and climb 14ers in Colorado. Not a lot of people climb the ones that are technical.
Yeah.
So being able to incorporate that and then just enjoy, 4 days out in the backcountry in Colorado where, you can go on these cool scenic drives in Colorado, but that'll never ever compare to being in the backcountry up close. You're right up against the base of humongous 14,000-foot mountain. Nothing really compares to that, and it's nice when your body will actually let you do that.
Yeah, yeah, that's it, and that's kind of part of what we talked about. I remember getting a text message from you that said, "Hey, I want to see you on a regular basis because this is the life I want to live."
Hmm.
Right, and so you've incorporated movement, you've incorporated being aware of how health and wellness impacts your ability to show up, no matter what the task is. So we you went back out to Colorado during the pandemic, and tell us about the encounter with the PT. You had an encounter with when you were listening to your body. Talk to us
Yes.
about that.
So I was still my hip that I'm still seeing Kenny for was not in the best of shape, but I got furloughed for a month back over the summer. I was like, okay, well, go to Colorado. What else am I going to do? Sit at home and do nothing? Like, I can apply for jobs if I don't think I'm going to keep this one, or as a little safety net, I can do that from any location. So I drove out there to mountain bike and hopefully hike a little bit, and then my bike got stolen on the first day, which is a fun little story of its own. But yeah, there was a morning I decided to go hike up to the top of Quandary Peak, which is 14er out there, pretty accessible. And I was like, okay, I got a speech from Kenny, right before I left my last PT session. Before I left, he said, "I'm not going to tell you don't do anything. Just listen to your body." So I made it. Let's see. I made it to about probably 13,500 feet in elevation, and it wasn't even the injured hip. It was the other hip. The hip flexor started hurting, getting pretty sore. I was like, okay, Andrew, if this gets any worse, you got to turn around. And about 500 feet up the trail, it just really was screaming at me. So I stood there, took a really cool video of the view because it was gorgeous. And as much as I am, and I think this probably needs to be prefaced with, if I had done that, if it had been 5 months before that, if it had been before I injured the hip and something like that happened, I would have been like, all right, suck it up and climb this mountain. And then would have ended up not being able to move for a month probably, or something like that. Um, but I think I finally, back in March, got burned and learned my lesson on that, on kind of, listening to your body, and it tells you when you need to stop, and kind of recognizing that and realizing, okay, I may not accomplish what I want to accomplish right now, but is it worth it? Like, there are not many things. I've had to draw that line in my head of like, okay, well, you know, I can't even think of anything off the spot. Maybe if I was like running a marathon in the Olympics, that might be like one of the very few things that I would ever be like, okay, it is worth like pushing through the pain and maybe never being able to do this again, or, getting injured from this. Like, there are very few things that it's actually worth it. Like, for example, this mountain, Quandary Peak, is not going anywhere. It's still out there. It's the same height.
Yeah.
I'm 24. I can go out there again, try it again.
Yeah.
So with all that in mind, I turned around, went back down, ran into a couple guys about a mile from the trailhead, and we started talking. And they're like, "Oh yeah, did you make it to the summit?" I was like, "No." My hip started hurting, and it started hurting pretty bad. So I had to turn around. And one of the guys is like, "Well, man, I got to tell you, I'm a physical therapist, and I am very proud of you for that."
Yeah. Yeah. So that,
Had a
like I
little
said,
talk.
man.
What were you saying?
No, I was just saying, like that's it. It's awareness, right? And
Mm,
then the idea that this peak is going to be there. Like you're going to be able to go do this again, and so um, maybe you could say delayed gratification, but I think
yeah.
really the way you preface it is that it's a journey. Like
Yeah.
you're we're developing this understanding, this idea that if we're working towards not necessarily a destination, but we're working towards goals and that continual process. Same thing. We can go back to engineering, especially on the manufacturing side, and look at that same concept and say, look,
Mm,
can we improve each day? All right, and then so that's kind of what you're doing along the journey. Is that it's not a sprint. It's not okay. I'm going to do this today. It's that today is just part of my 20-mile march. Today's
mhm.
my part of my 40-mile march. I'm going to go 20
Yep.
miles or 40 miles, but if I can consistently do that, um, whatever goals I have set, I'm going to get. Remember back when we were maybe middle school, high school, there's some people elementary school. There's some math teacher somewhere who asked you if you wanted a penny a day compounded or you wanted $30 million, something like that. That is how I can't remember the exact numbers, but at day 20 something, we're roughly at the same spot. But the last 4 or 5 days, I'm going to kick the stew out of the person who chose the 30 million, right? And so that's it. It's kind of working your plan, having an understanding, learning about your body, because and we talked about this, man. The goal, like you're the expert on Andrew, you have to show up in that body every single day. So our role really is just to kind of function as guides, whether you're seeing myself or somebody else on the team. It's really how do we show up for Andrew today and be the best guide for him so that if you learn something from the encounter, you can make better decisions when you're completely unplugged and going after whatever that goal is. All right, so that's awesome, and so I think for me, listening to that helps me to understand um, the importance of that do amazing things. Uh, that part of it, and you kind of think about it for us to celebrate our clients and the members of our community that add value to what how we get to practice and show up is really to build awareness that we have to provide support. Like we can motivate you to go climb a 14 footer, 14er, or we can inspire you to go run a marathon. But if we don't provide that support and in that supportive environment, and if we're not teaching, if we're not informing, then it all the motivation in the world and all the inspiration in the world really kind of falls short of I think how we are supposed to show up and how we're supposed to kind of impact those around us. And so, I mean, I've learned that we talk about books, we talk about manufacturing, we talk about what the ideal work life situation looks like. And all of that to me has been just as impactful for me because you bring something to the table and I may have to say, hey, you know what? I don't really know too much about that topic, but give me about a week. I'll be back. I'll have some information. And that's been the fun thing.